Joining us here for another edition of the Hops and Spirits Podcast, Summer School 2021, is Jeff Evans, the CEO, co-founder of Mean Mule Distilling Co. in Kansas City. Jeff, thanks for coming to talk a little agave spirits with us.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and it's kind of nice. You know, we talk a lot about beer and bourbon and whiskey, but a lot of people like agave, which more people would probably know tequila, but due to some certain wording, you guys chose agave spirits, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But because we're talking Summer School 2021, I figured your one tough question would be school-based. So, have you always been someone that has enjoyed learning, or has that come more later in life, or how is your learning journey?
Excellent question. As a kid, I would get pretty obsessive about things. So there would always be a subject that would intrigue me, and then and I would do everything I could to learn about that one subject for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks till I became basically an expert in that subject, and it bored me, and then I would just move on to the next thing. So, and that has followed on in my adult life as well. I do tend to obsess about things and learn everything I can about them, and then I move on to the next thing probably a few months later.
I've always been one that I've loved to learn, maybe not always about the topic I should learn about, whether it was school or even sometimes work. I'm kind of like that random fact person. Not that I'm going on Jeopardy or anything like that, but I just know a whole lot of useless information because I go down a rabbit hole, and the next thing I know, it's a couple hours later, and I've done a lot of reading on a very, very random topic. So I think it's always fun to just keep learning about different things, whether it's your own industry or just, something that you enjoy outside of that.
That's right. And, I probably would have been far more successful in my college career if my two passions had found a way to meet up. So if I had been obsessive about school, I would have done phenomenally. But for some reason, school is just kind of like a job. I don't know why. It's just...
Yeah, sometimes it's not as much fun. I always joke with people, especially on the podcast. I'm like, man, if they'd have told me about getting into the beer world, or not that I was like crazy into beer in high school or college, like that. But I mean, my career path could have been, could have been totally different. So, but we're here to talk, your company, Mean Mule, and making agave spirits in America. And I guess my first question for you is, what drew you all to launching a spirits company?
Yeah. That obsessive thing I was talking about earlier? So let's take a few steps back from that first. So I, at the time, was working in the engineering field. So I was a mechanical engineer, specializing in machine design for large-scale factories and mostly automotive. And it was a pretty tough industry, and I ended up being thrown out of the industry, so I had the opportunity to do something for myself. So I went with something with zero risk, like starting my own company, doing a spirit that had never been done before. And if I could go back, I probably would have just made whiskey. But I'd been trying a couple things, allegedly, in my basement, and the one thing I could not figure out was agave spirits, right? I couldn't make it work. And so that frustrated me to no end, to the point where I was going to become the master at this, right? I was going to conquer it. And so I can remember my wife, she doesn't often go down into the basement because we've got an older house. And so she comes home from work, and, I hadn't had a job for about, a month and a half, and she walks down there, and there's this laboratory, this just huge laboratory, and she's like, "What have you done? What are you doing?" I was like, "No, all this was totally free. I just bought it. I got it all on Craigslist on the free section, those drums and this and that, and put it all together." And so then she's super pragmatic, and I could kind of see the dollar signs rolling, behind her eyes a little bit, and she was like, we're going to do this for real. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, let's do it. And so she comes from, a little story about her is she comes from like 5 generations of distilling tradition. So like her great grandmother imported from Germany in the early 1800s. and built a still and started a company. And so she passed that knowledge down to each generation that followed her. And in the 1920s, there was a little bit of a social and economic change as far as alcohol is concerned. We call that prohibition. And that didn't stop her family, my wife's family, from making alcohol. It just made them a little bit more careful. At the time, her great-grandfather Fitz, he was running the whole operation. Well, one day, one of his customers decided he'd gotten a bad deal. So he reported Fitz to the feds. So here come these two revenuers up the long drive of the house, going to take Fitz to jail, and all 12 kids were out on the front porch crying. And her grandmother told this story constantly, because she was, I think, 5 or 6 at that time. Well, anyways, these two revenuers couldn't catch Fitz, so they ran. Fitz ran, and they tried to chase him, couldn't catch him. So they find the operation. They decide they're just basically going to find the operation on the property and shut it all down, come back later. They find this building on the back of the op, and they knew it was in there, right? It wasn't the first time. What they did know is that Fitz, being a very careful fellow, had built a false floor inside of this building. And on top of that floor, he'd gone out and he bought the meanest mule that money could buy. And underneath the floor, he had his whole operation. And so these two revenuers kick open this door, and kind of in their ignorance and kind of in their arrogance, and they come face to face with 700 pounds of mean Missouri Fury. And within 2 minutes, one man was dragging the other one down the road, and they never came back. So we're called the Mean Mule Distilling Company because we wanted to have a hat tip to that interaction there, because only one mule could save 5 generations of distilling tradition. That's a beautiful thing to write a story on. So at the time, the family was not making, say, agave spirits. It was mostly corn, whiskeys, fruit brandies, that kind of thing. And so we wanted to apply a lot of that old knowledge to a new horizon, and it's been going.
I love stories like that, especially when you can tie your history to family history, and it's real family history, real stories passed down, not what I call the quote unquote manufactured ones that some magically, I found this recipe in an old shoe. But I also love that you were kind of doing some home brewing, home distilling, however you want to phrase it. What was it like working and learning on something like that?
Well, as a caveat, I should put it out there. The Fed really doesn't like you doing that. Missouri's a funny state in that they have laws allowing the home distillation, the home creation of alcohol. And it depends on who you ask, but the majority of people would say yes. It's kind of written in the state laws there. The Fed considers it to be what we call a crime. So I encourage everyone to follow the law. But if you happen upon some knowledge by accident and then want to start your own thing, I'd love to talk to you about that. So it was, so the area we're in here in Kansas City, there's something like 9 breweries, 3 distilleries, and a winery in 2 blocks, right? And so I get a chance to meet a lot of brewers, a lot of distillers, and a lot of winemakers, and I realized that brewers tend to be happy-go-lucky, super jovial. They share, they like each other, and that's because they've gotten a chance to make their craft in the sunlight, right? In a garage with an open door and inviting their friends over. Whereas distillers, they hate each other because they've all had to be in their basement and wonder whether or not today's the day that they get busted, right? So it's it's really funny to see.
I love that because it is true. I mean, things are some are looked more proudly upon than others. You touched a little bit about the Mean Mule name.
Sure.
Was that a given that you were going to call it that based on that story when you started, or did you kick around a few other names, or how did you guys settle on that?
We kicked around some terrible names first. I'll be straight with you. 816 Distillery was one that we kicked around. And I'm so glad. My wife, she's the person that has all the great ideas around here. I just do numbers and I design stuff and I build stuff. That's my only claim to fame. My wife actually has a brain. And so she was like, yeah, we're not calling it 816 Distillery. We'll call it Mean Mule Distilling Co. because we want to use the story of my family. And I was like, God, that's perfect. It's great. Yeah.
And she is a genius, and as I have learned, listen to your wife, things go a whole lot better with life. Now, we talked about agave spirits, and people might be going, well, what is that? And I kind of touched on it. It's tequila for the most part. It's just like cognac and other things.
Sure.
Tequila is done in a certain region. In Mexico, things come a certain way. So I'm guessing, is that how you guys settled on agave spirits? And then I'm guessing there too is a little bit of a difference as well.
Well, so when we first got into it, we didn't know what the rules were, right? Because I was coming in this from a totally different background than most people do. And so we learned pretty quickly that words like tequila and mezcal, we were totally off limits, which is a good thing, honestly, because we're not here to misappropriate, 3,000 years of culture to try to make a buck. But what it did do is it kind of set the stage for us to start this new thing, right? And the world itself has moved a really funny direction. The best vodka is no longer made in Russia. The best gin is no longer made in England, right? The best bourbon isn't made in Bourbon County; it's made in Japan. So now we're in this zone where people, countries, cultures pick up things based on whether or not it suits the values of that system. And so for us, when we wanted to do agave spirits, it was all about, bootstrapping and the tradition that we've come from, which is a little bit different than, what you get from south of the border, but still it was this tradition of, bringing people together and kind of being a rebel a little bit, touch of rebellion. And so in the whole rebellion side of it itself, I think really drove us to agave spirits in general, because anyone can go out there and you can either buy whiskey and rebrand it, or you can buy gin and rebrand it. And so agave spirits at the time, and even now, are the only spirit that you cannot buy in bulk, unless you buy it from me. American agave spirits are the only spirit that you cannot buy in bulk and then rebrand. And we specifically will not sell, as the largest producer of agave spirits in the nation, we will not sell spirits to people who just want to rebrand it and sell it on their own, because we believe in the craft of the whole process. We believe that the product that we make has to be made, and American agave spirits in general have to be made in America by people, right? Rather than just like sold and rebranded. So that was a really big deal for us when we got into this whole thing. Is the authenticity had to exist in this.
And when someone too comes up and goes like, well, what is agave spirits, and how do you kind of say it's similar to tequila, or do you go like it's a cousin of it, or like how do you explain that to someone?
Spirit. Yeah, so we say American agave spirits are a sister spirit to mezcal and tequila and bacanora and raicilla, sotol, these kinds of things. And so it's truly an American variant, it's a truly American style of this. And the flavor profile, and send me your address, I'll make sure you get a bottle here. The flavor profile is just a touch different than you would typically get from, say, a standard tequila. We're not brewing with an open top fermenter. There's not a ton of like agave fields around us, being that we're in the city of Kansas City, and there's not a lot of agave fields around. So we don't get a lot of those natural enzymes and yeasts that come from the animals and plants around that are typically used to ferment tequila. So getting agaves to actually ferment here in America was a touch of a, challenge, which I think is pretty much what has made most other distilleries say, hey, we're not doing this. Because it's an expensive substrate when you buy it, and then you can waste a few hundred gallons of it, and you're like, we're not doing this. We're done, right? And so we've talked to a lot of different distilleries who have tried and failed, and I will tell you that probably would have happened to us, except for my extremely obsessive personality. So, and I couldn't say else.
See, it all comes back to that, and just your ability to push through and deep dive into something that you had no clue what you were getting into.
And at one point, my brother walked down in my basement, and he was like, "You still haven't figured this out?" I was like, "No, dude." And he was like, "Dude, I gotta be honest with you. Like, I get it. Quitters never win, and winners never quit. But man, if you're not winning and you're not quitting, then you're just an idiot." Well, yeah, I understand that.
Hey, hindsight's 20/20, and I'm sure you can hold that over him just a little bit nowadays. Now we talked about the agave. Now I'm guessing you don't get it. You don't have like a farm out back. Where do you get your agave from, and what do you use?
Right. So we use a Highland agave. It's grown at 6,500 feet. We use a single source agave farmer in the Jalisco region of Mexico. And I send him an email, say I need stuff. He sends it my way. So he's been a really good partner thus far.
How was it to kind of find that? I mean, because again, you're kind of coming at it a different way. You're
Right.
not distilling down there. You're distilling, in America. Was it difficult to find someone willing to work with you, or was it a little more easy than you expected?
Well, I expected it to be a lot more difficult than it actually was. I did some Googling and then got on some websites that referred me to other websites, and eventually I was on websites with the .mx on it, so I knew I was kind of like on the right track. And so then the phone numbers had more numbers than I was expecting and a plus sign, and so then there was that whole thing. And so by the time I actually talked to someone, I called a guy and he answered the phone in Spanish, and I was like, oh no, I didn't. Why didn't I expect this? Like, why didn't I expect this guy would speak Spanish? So it's like, hey, do you speak English? And he's like, no. I was like, oh no. And so then the phone kind of like, and a little kid gets on the phone and he speaks English, and I'm like, oh cool, all right, let's talk. So that's kind of where we got started.
I love that because again, you're just kind of, I don't want to say flying by the seat of your pants, because from what I gather, you do a lot of research. You're very smart at what you do, but it's got to be fun to kind of reminisce on some of this and how you got started and where you're at now.
It's good that we remember the good times. Yeah, there was some tough times in there, but yeah, it's been a blast.
And we talked a little bit about the Highland agave there. Did you start off with that from the get-go, or did you use some other things and see what worked? How did that process go for you all?
So initially I just tried to find some jugs of processed agave nectar on the internet, buying it on eBay or Amazon or whatever, and then it would ship to my house. So that's kind of where I started. But coming from a manufacturing background, I knew eventually I was going to need a supplier, and we were going to need to buy a whole lot from them at one time. And so the whole, buying a 500 milliliter bottle at a time was probably not the way to go about it, because it would take a lot of bottles. So we kind of understood that whole side of thing, or I kind of understood that whole side of thing. So I always kind of had my eye open. I was kind of I was on the various home distillation forums trying to see if anyone had a contact or whether no one had any sort of contact. So kind of had to go forth and figure it out, I suppose.
And sometimes that always works out best in the end. When it comes to distilling your spirits, how do you guys do that? And is it similar to, say, something like a people think of when we're talking whiskey, gin, and stuff here in America, or is it more like the mezcal and tequila from down south?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot of characteristics of it that are very tequila mezcal. Mm-hmm. It also has a lot of rum characteristics. So all of our equipment is not going to surprise you based on what I've said. But so I designed and built all of our equipment. And naturally there are some things that had to be different about it, because apparently that's who I am. And so the product it makes is actually pretty fantastic. And so it's somewhere between a rum and a tequila is what it tastes like.
And I was going to say, if someone comes there, are they going to be able to go, okay, that's a still, or are they going to go, what in the world creation did he come up with?
There's always a little bit of that. Yeah. Yeah, the purists show up and their first question is, why? Why would you do this? And my answer is always, I don't know. I was obsessed about it, and here we are. It was an experiment that got out of hand. And so that seems to pacify them. But ultimately, this is the direction the world's heading. And so it's just part of that necessary change that always happens.
Well, and talking to other folks, whether they're in the bourbon, the beer world, they all use different equipment, and some of them have. I mean, you could go in two places, and you got a 40-foot still in still Austin, and you got a normal old fashioned one, at a long heritage brand. So you just never know what you're going to see, and what works for one might not work for another. But now to talk a little bit about the agaves that you do make, let's go into that. Let's go with the silver first, which won gold, I believe, at the San Francisco Spirits Competition.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that, and then also what it was like to win an award for it?
Yeah. So our silver obviously is unaged. Ah, it's a fly. Oh, look at that guy. It's our pet. So the silver is unaged. It's very floral. It tastes like has citrus notes, pineapple notes, hibiscus notes. When the fermentation is running, and you crack the lid, for some reason, to me it always smells like Dr. Pepper. I don't know why. And I've told people like, hey, does this smell like Dr. Pepper to you? And they're like, yeah, this is weird. So some of that flavor does come over. I wouldn't say that our spirit tastes exactly like Dr. Pepper, which is probably a trademark brand. I don't know if we can say it on the podcast, but we're going to say it anyways. So the silver is absolutely it's beautiful. And so, to be fair, so we hired my brother-in-law, who is now the 6th generation of distiller in his family. I'll tell you that I submitted some spirits a couple of years ago for the World Spirits Competition, and they did not do well. So I brought on Tyler, and Tyler's been making just fantastic products. And so I just told him, I was like, hey, we want to submit for the World Spirits Competition. And he's an ex-military police officer. He's ex-military, and so he just comes in and he's very like by the book and doesn't want any sort of drama, and always shows up at the same time and does his thing, and everything's clean and everything works and everything's organized, and he goes home. Like, that's just who he is. And so it's great, right? No drama whatsoever. And so I tell him like, hey, I want to do this thing, and he's like, why would we do that? And I'm like, well, because you're a fantastic spirit. And he's like, okay. I'm like, all right. So I said, so what is your best batch? Like, what have you done? Like, of all these bottles and all these different batches we've done, which one's your best? And he goes, they're all the same. Like, okay. So which one? So he just like snags a bottle and he's like, just send this to him. I'm like, all right, cool. So we submitted in like February, and all of our spirits, and I hadn't heard anything for a couple months. And I don't know if you're this way, but my head pops off the pillow when I pick up my phone, and I pull up my email, and I just kind of like glance at it with one eye open, trying to wake up. Mm-hmm. And I see that we have an email from the World Spirits Competition. I was like, okay, cool. And I get into it, and it says gold medal. I was like, this is a joke. They're going to take this away from us. Like, I'm going to get a call today, and they'll be like, oh, no. We sent that out by accident. It's totally wrong. And I was like, all right, well, we'll see what happens. And 3 days later, like, nothing had happened. They hadn't pulled the medal back. So I was like, okay, well, maybe there's some merit to this thing. And so yeah, about 3 days in, then we kind of celebrated. Like, I was just going to let them, like, give them the opportunity to take it back if they wanted to, And, but, I mean, we were totally floored. Mostly because I almost feel it's slightly sacrilegious for an American-based agave spirit to win any sort of a medal at the World Spirits Competition. But secondly, I think that it really added some notoriety to the brand. It added, what's the word I'm looking for? It almost like justified the whole thing, right? Said, okay, this has value, this works. And so that was wonderful for me. It was wonderful for the whole team. We ended up taking a silver and a bronze as well. And it's a little confusing because silver won gold, gold won bronze, and then Heritage won silver. So I'm just thinking about renaming all of them based on whatever their medal got, right?
I mean, that could work. That could work. So was the silver like the first one that you all created, or was it one of the other ones? So the silver's like your baby, and that had to be a very, very proud moment then.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And then now to go into the gold, what's the biggest difference between the gold and the silver the gold agave spirit, not the gold medal, the gold agave
Yeah.
spirit.
Yeah. So there's this funny old rule in the spirits industry, a funny old saying that says that a barrel fixes all sins, or barrel covers all sins, right? And so the idea thus far has been, if you make a spirit and it's just not quite good enough to be your clean spirit, your silver spirit, your white spirit, you put it in a barrel, let it sit. All of the stuff that probably hurts a little bit, you're talking about your volatile esters, they all evaporate through the barrel. What you're left with is heavier compounds. You pick up a lot of sugars and a lot of flavors from the barrel, and then you get a better product, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't like that, right? We try to maintain a certain level of quality with anything we do. So for our gold, I wanted to take our best products and put it in a barrel, let it sit for like 8 weeks and rest, and then bottle it. So that's what we do with our gold. Is it's basically rested for 8 weeks in a number 3 Char Missouri white oak barrel, and then our heritage goes into that barrel. So it's a second use barrel, and then we age it for 12 months. The last batch went for 18 months because I forgot that we had a barrel. Oh shoot, we got it!
That's a special release. It just works out that way.
So yeah, and it's a wonderful product. It really is. It has a lot of the qualities that you probably expect from something that has close to 2 years of age on it, and it turned out far better than we were expecting. Probably far better than we deserve, and we're super thankful for that.
And then if someone's coming there and they're like, all right, tell me what's the quick Cliff Notes version of the difference between the three? How would you explain that to them in terms of maybe taste or something like on that end?
Yeah. So the first thing people typically ask is, how does it taste different? And the second question they ask is, well, what's the cost difference? It's a lot of stuff, right? So a bottle of Heritage goes somewhere between $60 and $70. A bottle of gold goes for somewhere around $40, and our silver goes for $29.99. And so it's a little more silver maybe the rest of them. So that would probably be our flagship product. But the flavor profiles you're going to get are just, for the silver you get your floral, you get your sweet, you get your pineapples. And then when it sits in a barrel for just a little bit, you lose a little bit of the floral, because that's typically some of the volatile esters taste like floral notes. And then you gain just a touch of, say, vanilla, because it's a Missouri white oak barrel. You get plum, you get some of that darkness from the char of the barrel itself. And then for the Heritage, where it goes for a second use barrel, the beauty of a second use barrel is you don't get any of that latex that you normally get from first use, right? And so the gold isn't in there long enough to pick any of that latex up either. All the latex typically comes out, or the latex flavor comes out when you're cleaning the barrel and you're putting a new product in it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds there. The Heritage pulls a whole lot of plum, a whole lot of stone fruit. It's like biting into like an overripe peach. It just has this full mouth feel to it. Plus you get a lot of the barrel characteristics of like the oak and char, and it makes a great product. There's just a touch of the vanilla on there. Most of the vanilla goes into the gold, so it's just enough to add like this a really beautiful, just like soft note, right?
I love the complexity of each that you explain, because while they're all the same base spirit, it's amazing what can happen when you put them in something different, or just change something at the very end, the finish, so to speak, and what comes from there. Now, if someone's coming out to visit y'all, because hopefully now people are allowed out and are getting out a little bit more, what can they expect when they get to go visit Mean Mule?
Right. So the tasting room itself runs like a full bar. So it's very Midwest meets Southwest. We've got a gigantic green Persian rug. There's a blue Chesterfield couch sitting on it. Then we have 2 forest green armchairs there, and a big oak table in the middle. And then we have a series of somewhat lighter stained oak tables and bar. Everything is offset with this beautiful dark blue that we do, and so it really feels like this whole It's like Southwest at your grandma's house kind of feel, and it's super fun. And then if people show up and they want to drink at Mean Mule, the first thing they have to get is the Paloma. It's by far our most popular drink. Most Palomas are typically made with grapefruit juice, but we don't use that. We use a grapefruit, a pamplemousse liqueur is what we use. And as everyone knows, pamplemousse is the smallest of all the mousses. So I always tell people to get the Paloma first. You can't go wrong with a margarita. Our menu changes every 3 months, depending on the season and what's popular. And so right now we've got just some real bangers on the menu that launches middle of next week. And it's going to be an absolute blast. It's going to be fantastic.
I was going to say, how nice is it to be able to have cocktails and so forth? Because not everyone's going to. It sounds like y'all spirits are definitely, you could drink them neat because they have so much flavor. But a lot of people, that may not be their first, exactly how they want to hop into giving it a try. How nice is it to have a cocktail bar that can come up with some really cool ideas and give people some different options?
Yeah. Firstly, the huge step for any spirit is education, right? So like after you buy it, what do you do with it? Right? Does it just go sit on a shelf? Does it sit in the freezer? Like what happens to it? And so I think that can turn a lot of people off to spirits because their only interaction they've ever had, short of a margarita, with tequila is taking shots, and they're like, this hurts, right? And everyone has that bad experience with tequila, like everybody. So you tell people, hey, we make a variant of that, we make that here, and they're like, ooh, no. Like their college years suddenly come back to them, right? They're like, oh God, no, there was this one night, it was rush week, right? So everyone has that experience. So the beautiful part about what we do is we have the opportunity to educate people on what we do, on the quality of our products, on how to make something wonderful. And so over the pandemic, when everything shut down, we took that opportunity because it's always something we've talked about and always something we've done. So during the pandemic, we had the opportunity to do that a lot. What we did was we launched cocktail kits. So to apply with both state and federal law, it had to be in its original package, so it was packaged liquor, is what it was. And then just the fixings and syrups, custom-made syrups that we'd make in our bar. And we would deliver those to your house in less than 2 hours for $40, right? And it would serve 10 people. And the amount of kits that we went through, it was wild. We beat 3 years of sales in 3 months. It was wild. And so people were super supportive. Everyone was bored. They wanted something to do. But it gave us the opportunity to educate people on the product we make and then how to make their own thing at home. So it came with recipe cards. Then people started collecting the recipe cards. Then at the end of it, we'd gone through about 15 or 20 different cocktails. Everyone had the recipe cards. They knew what to buy. They knew how to make it. And it really kind of helped us establish our place in the market and establish our place in people's homes, which is always the goal, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's cool to see too, because it was a tough time for a lot of businesses, and just turned kind of what could have been a very big negative into a huge positive for y'all is awesome to see. And I'm also curious too, like, because just now that I've jumped into this journey of the podcast, we've been doing this over a little over a year now. I've come to the conclusion, like, mezcal and tequila seems to be almost that next wave of maybe what could be big. You know what I mean? Like, because there's so many different flavor options now, so many different kind of styles. Is that something that it's nice to almost be kind of ahead of the curve on that, and people are now starting to maybe branch out into stuff like the agave spirits more than they might have before?
So to answer your first question, is it fun to be ahead of the curve? No, it really sucked for a long time. Yeah. So the funny thing about being ahead of the curve is you're the one that's setting the curve and you're pushing the curve forward. And so anyone else who's making agave spirits in America right now, they in some ways get to benefit from some of the infrastructure that we set forward. So when we first started this, the federal government had no designation for agave spirits made in America. So to get a label approved, what's called a cola, to get a cola approved took us something like 9 months. A standard cola takes 3 days. You send your artwork to the government. You say, this is what it is. This is the recipe. This is what is going on. This is what's going in. They look at it. They say, okay, has the Surgeon General's warning. Doesn't have anything inappropriate. It's fine. Right? It's a whiskey. It's fine. And so 3 days in and out the door. So 9 months in, they're like, we don't know what to do with this thing. No one's making this. We've never seen this before. We only approve things we know. And so I had to climb kind of the ladder at the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau to talk to someone who can make decisions. So 9 months in, finally I get the right person's phone number and I talk to them and I was like, oh God, please don't hang up. Just hear me out. We're doing this thing. No one's done it before. This is what it's made out of. This is what it's similar to. What do we do? And she was like, all right, new class designation. Let's do this. So now there's a class designation for American agave spirits. That hadn't existed before, right? And so it's little things like that. Plus educating the public on the fact that agave spirits can be made in America rather than just in Mexico, and what the differences and what the similarities are. That's something that's taking place, right? American agave spirits typically is in anyone's lexicon. They've never said it before. They don't know what it is. Most people don't even know that tequila and mezcal come from agave. So there's education that has to happen just in the name itself. And so it's been an uphill battle, I'll tell you. Many times I was like, oh, we're just going to make a vodka. We're done with this. We're making a vodka now. But maybe it's my real passion for abuse. Maybe it's my obsessive personality, but we just couldn't let go. And so, here we are.
I was gonna say, and here you are, and hopefully, like I said, as tides are changing and tequila, mezcal, agave is becoming more known here in America. The thing that stubbornness and persistence will pay off in the end. And I guess that leads me to my last question: is what's next for y'all? Just gonna continue to kind of go down the path of the three. That you can talk about, because I always don't want to let someone spoil a good surprise. But what's next for y'all?
Yeah, so we've got we've got a couple products that we're working on right now that people are either going to really love or really hate. And so hopefully more love than hate. Right now, the cool part is we're really working on branching out. So right now we're statewide in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma. We are in discussions with distributors in Florida and Illinois and Kentucky and Tennessee and Colorado and California and Texas. And Nebraska, Oregon. And so the big part for us is just branching out, expansion, right? And I've got a very, very connected sales manager who's been with us from just the absolute beginning. And he's doing a wonderful job. He's very well connected. He's talking to the right people. And so for us, it's just kind of a matter of time to expand in those things. Little things like gold medal at the World Spirits Competition kind of puts us on the map a little bit. Gives us some a little bit of notoriety, and I think that helps as well. Because the first thing a distributor asks is, well, is it any good, right? And then in the past, when we say, well, you'll just have to taste it, and maybe it's not your thing, but it could be someone's thing. What do you do, right? So now we just say, oh yeah, I won a gold medal at the World, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah. Let's talk. Right? And so so we got that going for us.
That's awesome to hear and awesome to see. Yeah. And then is there, like, I always ask this too because I'm always curious to see what people's thoughts are, and I guess so this might be my last question is, do you guys ever kind of do some like collaboration types or different things or a little more funky finishes, like get a little more creative, or is that kind of like, no, I just want to keep doing what we're doing, keep making good things and see where that goes?
Yeah, so step one is create some good spirits. Step two is create some weird spirits. We do a couple of collaborations. For instance, a coffee roaster has a couple of our barrels for Heritage that we did. So he's doing an aged coffee in those. So that'll pick up a lot of the notes of the Heritage. We do give a lot of our barrels to the breweries around us, and they make some really crazy stuff with it. So we do those, and ultimately, like, we just want to connect with people. We want to get people in. We want to get them liquid to lips. You know, that's the big seller for us, is just liquid to lips. People try it, they love it, they buy it, and so that's kind of how it's been going.
Well, Jeff, like I said earlier, it sounds like you all are doing some great things. It's really cool to see what you all have been able to do in it. Like you said, a category you all had to create here in America, so people would even know what in the world to call it. And if you haven't yet, folks, check them out. Mean Mule Distilling Co. They're based out of Kansas City. And Jeff, thanks for taking some time to share your guys' amazing story.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun talking to Jeff. So much insight, and so cool to see what they had to do to really make agave spirits work in America, and how much groundwork they laid for others going forward. Don't forget to check out our last episode next week here on Summer School 2021 called Getting Creative with Connor Query and Carrie Johnson, two creative folks in the beer world who may not be working with beer, but working with some of their outside products, so to speak. It's a very fun episode, and you won't want to miss that. Remember, check us out on our social media at Hop Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you can, give us a 5-star review, subscribe to us on YouTube, just tell your friends about us. We really appreciate all the love and support from y'all. And remember, until next time, cheers, everyone.